I love tomatillos. I love all Mexican food, but tomatillos are special because they're nice and sweet and they're really unusual, especially here in Ukraine. Uh, they're related to the tomatoes, and somehow tomatoes became popular in Europe, but tomatillos never did. And so I've got a little bed here. I think I've got about 75, maybe 100 plants. In this spot where we are, I built a raised bed. We came here in 2016 and there was nothing here, just a piece of grass. The guys in the halfway house did all their laundry here. And there was a big pile of rocks right around the corner. And so I didn't have anything to do with a big pile of rocks. I had this nice piece of ground that I thought I could plant on. When I dug in it, it was full of building rubble. Just an inch under the ground was a whole bunch of building rubble. This building's been here, some people say 200 years, some people say 300 years, and so it's been around for a while, and there's a lot of things that have happened here. And so I took these rocks, I built this wall all the way around. I started filling it up with compost from the horse and the chickens and the goats, and just let it sit. And then after at least 2 seasons, we started to get volunteer tomatoes growing in it. I thought, all right, it's enough. The soil's not too hot from the compost, from the manure, so we can start planting here. And so I started planting tomatoes and tomatillos in this particular bed. I took a piece of ground that wasn't being used. I took this big pile of rocks that wasn't being used, and I put the two things together. Today I've got about 100 volunteer tomatoes. Some are tomatoes that were in another bed right around the corner that the mole came along and it would push out the new plants. It wouldn't kill them, it would just crawl underneath and push them up out of the ground. So I picked all those up, put them back in the hothouse, knowing that sooner or later I was going to transplant them again, and now I'm going to put them out here. I didn't try to make the mole go away, and I didn't fight with him. I just thought, all right, you don't want a tomato plant in that one spot, I'll put it somewhere else. I made use of what I had. And then I've got a bunch of volunteer tomatoes, a few hundred of those out of the big greenhouse, the large one. When I would be weeding, I'd come across a bunch of volunteer tomatoes. I have no idea what variety they are. And they've been in that greenhouse. Nobody planted last year, nobody planted the year before last. So these volunteer tomatoes have been dormant for a couple of years. Like I said, I don't know what variety they are, but I started picking them up. Now I've got a couple of hundred of them. And I'm pretty sure they're going to be indeterminate tomatoes, which is what I normally grew before, which means that they'll grow until they get some sort of disease, a pest, or the frost. So I'm going to put them out here along with a few of the Romas and then the tomatillos. I could have just thrown them away. I could have just decided they're weeds just like everything else and tossed them. But I took advantage of what I had. There was no reason not to try and make something out of them. And now I'll generate income from it. All of this stuff, this piece of ground that wasn't being used, these rocks that weren't being used, and these volunteer tomatoes. That's the way it works with me. I haven't always been that way, but I'm pretty good at looking at a situation and figuring out, all right, what's the best I can do with this? When we were brought here in 2016, it was with the understanding that we were not going to get paid to be here, that they needed somebody to manage the place. They gave us a place to live. We had to pay the light bill. We had to feed ourselves, and we figured it out. And then as time went by, we've been able to do okay and help a lot more people by being resourceful. It's like I said, it's not always been that way. But for the first 40 years of my life, I had one set of priorities. And in 2001, everything turned around. I was a project manager out in California, in Arizona, and building multi-story high-rises and casinos, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, San Francisco, places like that. And I was working on a project in Los Angeles. I built 2 911 centers for the city of LA. big high-profile projects. And there was a problem with one of the buildings, and so I flew out to LA and went and met with the head architect and the head engineer. And it's about 40 people in the room. And the top floor of this architectural building, architectural office, looked out over LA. And the head architect from this big firm was in my face saying, "You will do this." And I got right back in his face and said, "You will do this." And fortunately, one of the other subcontractors made a concession that allowed me and him both to save face. But I got back in the car on the way home. I was going to fly back to Phoenix. And I'm packing up the car thinking, this is really cool. I'm good at this, and it's really cool, and they pay me very well. But this ain't me. This is not me. What I'm doing right now, talking to you, this is what I do. This is me. And so that was in early 2001. I resigned from my job a few months later, gave up 6 figures to make barely 5 figures. I was doing okay, but I was happier. And I gave up everything in order to get rid of a lot of stuff. I downsized tremendously. And as a result of that, I ended up going back to college and ended up coming to Moscow on spring break. Not a warm place to come to during spring break. But I ran into a lot of people that had a problem that I had been offered a solution to, and decided I would try to help people for a living. Not even for a living, just try to help people and assume that God would take care of me. A few years later, and this is something that's been on my mind all day. A few years later, 2012, I had already married Lydia. I was back in the States. I was selling vegetables at J&D Produce in downtown Statesboro, and I was walking back and forth to work. And one morning I was walking to work, and God spoke to me as clearly as I'm speaking to you now. And he said, "You will have a son, and he will finish your work, and you don't have to worry about him." And so 2 years later, that's when Danny was born. And he's perfect. But what I didn't understand at the time was that I didn't have to stress about anything. I didn't understand that when I was 20, when I was 30, when I was 50. I didn't have anything to worry about. That if I just look for opportunities to help people, God's going to take care of the rest of it. That I'm not in control of anything. All I'm supposed to do is, when I see an open door, I'm supposed to walk through it. And not worry, not stress. And now, I turned 63 yesterday. I'm sitting out here playing with tomatillos and talking to you people. And, what do I have to worry about? The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Since Saturday, today is Thursday, since Saturday, we've averaged about 4 hours every day of electricity. The lights have been off all this time. Today's been okay. But I understand that there's a lot of people around the world that would think that electricity 4 hours a day is a luxury. I'm healthy. Danny's healthy. Lydia's healthy. We got plenty to eat. I probably ate too much today. I got clean water. I got something to do, of purpose, of use to help people. What have I got to worry about? And I've never had anything to worry about, even though I have stressed most of my life. For the first 40 years of my life, I was dependent upon other people's opinion. And that's when I opened the door and walked out. For that, I'm truly blessed. When it gets down to it, we're all blessed. It's just a matter of looking at our priorities and figuring out what's important and what doesn't mean shit. Slava Ukraine.